Hello, everyone. I'm Keith DeStone, and it's HeroesX office hours for v14 of HeroesX. And I'm here as usual with Greg, Nagy, and Sarah, and Janet, and Elen. And we're going to talk about the discussion questions for hours 16 and 17 on the Oresteia of Aeschylus. Question for hour 16 goes like this. If you were attending the first performance of the Agamemnon of Aeschylus in 458 BCE, would you need the background that you get from hearing about Agamemnon in a performance of the Iliad? So we've heard about Agamemnon in the Iliad a little while ago, and now he's back.
He's back with a vengeance.
So what are folks saying about this?
Well, one of them is wondering, because why does the background of Agamemnon in the Iliad leave out so much? Why do we get more details from the Odyssey?
Oh, that's a very clever angle. And that just makes me circle back to a point that I want to make about the Iliad and the Odyssey together. We really have to think of Homeric poetry as both of these amazing epics. And we can't just treat the Iliad by itself or the Odyssey by itself as a kind of Homeric statement. The Homeric statement is a double statement, two sides of one coin, so to speak. And I think we tend to forget that. And I think that our participant is very clever in pointing out that, in a sense, the background on Agamemnon, as far as Homeric poetry is concerned, has to factor in the Odyssey. And I confess that even when I was formulating the question that I asked, I kind of blanked out on the Odyssey, which I shouldn't have. And when we think of Odyssey 24, doesn't Odyssey 24 say everything that should still be said about the Homeric Agamemnon? Excellent point, excellent point. Makes me rethink a lot of things. That said, I would still say that what the Athenian public hears in 458 BCE pretty much spells out the agenda of what we learn from Homeric poetry. It's pretty complete, and I'm still tempted to say that you could understand Agamemnon without Homeric poetry just by hearing and seeing the Agamemnon of Aeschylus in 458 BCE. I'm still tempted to say that.
Many of the participants said the same thing. You know, one can appreciate the Oresteia without knowing the Homeric epic. Yet there's such a close relationship between the tragedies and the Homeric epic, and tragedies are feeding from Homeric epic. So there is this continuous nice cycle. You will definitely know about the Homeric epic. You are going to see tragedies and see
yes
this relationship.
Yes, and after all, Greek song culture doesn't seem to be allergic to repetition. Or I shouldn't say repetition, I should say reenactment, reperforming, making something new, but in the sense that the old is perfectly relevant to the present, that kind of new. You know, I am working with a very intelligent student of Byzantine literature. His name is John Key, and last week we were reading the Orestes of Euripides, and he pointed out to me that the Byzantine canon, so to speak, for Greek tragedy, simply features the Orestes of Euripides as the basics for what we moderns would understand as what you just said, dear Janet, the Oresteia trilogy. In other words, you have one tragedy substitutes for what we today, we moderns, call the Oresteia trilogy, quote unquote. And that makes me think, all right, you get the basics of the Agamemnon myth in the Iliad plus Odyssey combined. And thanks to our participant, I'll now say it that way for the rest of my life. Then there's the Aeschylean version, so to speak. And then there is the Euripidean version, which compresses everything into one tragedy.
I think the consensus seems to be, yes, they would have been, the original audience would have had that background knowledge and they would have been prepared. I suppose we could think of your notional 6-year-old that you were talking about the other week that maybe hadn't heard it. It does seem a very self-contained drama, but by focusing in on these more individual stories, unlike the epic, maybe
yes,
there's that more personal emotional response.
Yes, and more user-friendly. Could I put it that way, from the point of view of a song culture in the middle of the 5th century, as opposed to earlier phases of the song culture? You know, something that does torment me, and has for many years, is that although I can imagine more or less an entire Iliad, you notice I don't say the entire Iliad, and an entire Odyssey being performed at the Pan-Athenaic festival, I can't for the life of me imagine something like that to happen in the middle of the 5th century. There's just not enough time to perform the entire Iliad and the entire Odyssey at the Festival of Our Lady of Athens in late August every 4 years. There's just not enough time. There's no way, when you reconstruct the bits and pieces of all the things that were going on at the Pan-Athenaic festival, that you could get the Iliad and the Odyssey in their complete form as we read them today. 15,000 plus verses for the Iliad, 12,000 plus verses for the Odyssey. I just don't see it. And on the other hand, I do see the medium of tragedy compressing everything into a time frame that is manageable for the very busy body politic of Athens in the middle of the 5th century. And as you know, I don't even like to say Oresteia trilogy, because then I don't know what to do with the satyr drama that was also performed. Maybe it's just a coincidence that Agamemnon, Libation bearers, and Eumenides work together so well as a triad. But even that much is much less in volume than the Iliad in its entirety. And now let's add the Odyssey in its entirety as we know them.
And Greg, what about the other poems of the epic cycle, which are not the Homeric ones, but they were floating about as well, weren't they? We only have those plot summaries, but and some of that does cover some of the same part of the story. So there would have been an awareness of that as well, perhaps. So very difficult to arrive and never know any of it before. You're already aware that that audience would already be aware, wouldn't they, of the whole story?
But I would say one thing about the cycle is I think the cycle shall we say, got left out of the program, so to speak, of the Panathenaic festival early enough that I wouldn't expect the cycle to be part of the program by 458 at the Panathenaic festival. And meanwhile, at the festival of Dionysus, you have this more user-friendly medium where the myths of the heroic world can be so well compressed. And then if I fast forward, then you go to the very, very, very busy time of Byzantine civilization. So I guess you can get most of what you want from the Orestes of Euripides. And when John Key and I were reading the Orestes last week, I thought, wow, this is a busy person's Oresteia trilogy. I'm getting everything that I can get from Aeschylus, just as maybe Aeschylus can get everything he gets from the Iliad plus Odyssey combined. Wow, this is a lot of rethinking, thanks to the dialogue that we're engaged in, and I'm not a different person after engaging in this dialogue.
Well, let's see if we can rethink the libation bearers and the Eumenides. There's a question about those.
I'm sure we can.
The question is, the Furies are on whose side, really, in the libation bearers of Aeschylus? And what about in the Eumenides of Aeschylus? Whose side are the Furies on?
Yes. I bet we'll have some rethinking here as well. Let's jump in.
Yes. One participant mentioned the Furies seem to be on the side of justice in the libation bearers to continue the cycle of vengeance against unjust actions. But in the Eumenides, they seem to follow Athena.
Well, they have to. They have to. They're living in the city that is dominated by her. Keith and I used to joke, and I think you're part of that. You were in on this joke, dear Hélène, because you, as well as Sarah and Janet, all of you three, visited with me at one point or another the cave of the Eumenides, which is there at the foot of the Acropolis. And I think the joke was that Athena now has a condominium with the Furies. In other words, they're there at ground zero while Athena is in the heights of the Acropolis, right? But in a sense, it's a symbiotic relationship. Or if I can say it again very crassly, Athena says, all right, you can stay in this condominium, but you have to stay down there in the basement, in the cellar. Since you're a French speaker, I should say in the cellar, not in the basement. I think that captures it better, don't you think? The cave of the Eumenides at ground zero at the foot of the Acropolis.
One of the participants made a connection between Kronos killing Uranus and Furies are active when Orestes kills Clytemnestra, and not when Clytemnestra kills Agamemnon.
Oh, I'm not sure. I think they're always active. And I really think of the Furies as a wonderful way of imagining in a non-individualized way the unfinished business that an angry hero, male or female, feels when they die without seeing the kind of vengeance that they're thirsting for. And so it's a kind of a collectivized way of thinking of unfinished business, the anger that has to be processed somehow, and that has to come back even from the dead if there's need for some kind of a cosmic sanction. And thank goodness we have the Olympians coming to the rescue in the triad of tragedies that we're considering. Notice I'm not even saying trilogy. I'm just not going to say trilogy anymore.
So can I ask you, Greg, we're talking about the Furies themselves actually appear as
yes
characters, if you will, embodied, embodying themselves in,
yes
in the last of these plays. But in the others, are the other heroes, Orestes himself and Clytemnestra before that, are they, as it were, enacting the fury of the Furies? Have they almost become Furies themselves, in a sense?
Sure. Oh, yes. When I was talking about a collectivized way of visualizing the anger of a hero, I was really thinking of individual heroes like Clytemnestra, the anger that's inside her, and what's going to happen when she's killed, when she dies. Where does that anger go? The anger of Agamemnon, the anger of all of these characters. If there is no requital, I'll put it that way, if there's no compensation for some wrong that's committed, and before the era of civilization, when you have trial by jury, which is the Athenian way of imagining that the present is distinct from the heroic past. Oh, they didn't have trial by jury. They only had vendetta. Well, when you have a situation like that, of course we can personalize these very strong emotions. Just as in general, I'm noticing in visual art, I've been working very hard on vase paintings, representations in vase paintings of basic emotions, and you can visualize them by personifying a beautiful female body, or an ugly female body, or a beautiful male body and an ugly male body, and then give it an abstract name, which is, oh, this stands for something. And I think of the Erinues that way too. It's you can, I think, visualize them very specifically as an individual angry ghost, or a collectivized way of imagining the angriness of many heroes in the heroic age who went to their death without a sense of satisfaction concerning wrongs that are not righted. But you know, when we think about trial by jury and, oh, we're now civilized and we don't have vendetta, nevertheless, if you look at the actual language of the legality of the legal system in Athens during the time of Aeschylus and well into the later part of the 5th century, and then the 4th century, and on it goes. Think of how you say prosecutor in Athenian legal terminology. And hey, we're now civilized. It's diokon, the pursuer. And what about the defendant? The theogon, the fleer. So the idea of running after somebody is still there. The vendetta is still there. It's just that it's acculturated. It has been, shall we say, tamed, civilized, thanks to Our Lady of Athens, who, I love the way she says, I am your gardener. In other words, if you want an ideal society, think of me as your gardener, which takes us right back to the Garden of Laertes, doesn't it? What a beautiful way for the Homeric poetry. Notice I'm not saying Odyssey. Homeric poetry to reach a conclusion, shall we say, where in Homeric poetry, at the end of the Odyssey, Athena prevents any vendetta from happening. So the garden, if it's going to be a garden, has to ban vendetta.
And you talked about that metaphor for decay versus
yes.
hubris in terms of vegetative metaphors.
Yes.
So that fits in so beautifully, doesn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, and yet it's the language is the language of the cult hero, which is why I think even though Athena is in charge and she is now the producer, director, everything of what's going to turn out as the ideal society, the language is still the language of hero cult, and we still have to go back to the idea of blood price and all those other aspects of vendetta. They're still there. A friend of mine who went on to become a public servant after her PhD in classics, and who went to many trials in today's American society in that context, was telling me about all these situations where the verdict is announced at a trial today, and how the family of the aggrieved will act like furies if they don't get satisfaction, because technically the law should get satisfaction, but it often doesn't. And then the fury-like language, it's still there, and the furies are still there. It's just that they're subordinate to Athena, going right back to that observation that our wonderful participant made.
Well, folks, this is amazing. I don't want this to stop.
I don't either.
But we should.
But I guess we have to, or we'll just continue next time. How's that?
Continue next time with more tragedies. Let's see, Sophocles.
Oh my goodness.
We'll talk about Oedipus.
My goodness, bigger than all of us. Oh my.
All right, until next time.
Till the next time.